All right, let's get right into it. When we think about checking in on our mental health, our minds usually go to the big things: sleep, appetite, how motivated we feel. But today, we're going to dig into something a little more personal, something that often goes unspoken: our solo habits, and what they might be trying to tell us about what's really going on inside. And that leads to the big question, right? Is this just a physical act, or could it be an emotional message? We're going to explore how these very private behaviors can actually be a pretty powerful mirror for our inner world, sometimes showing us things before we've even consciously put the pieces together ourselves. So let's start there, with this idea of an unspoken connection between our bodies and our minds. See, here's the thing. Our bodies have their own way of talking. When we fall into certain patterns, it's not always about physical desire. It might be your body's way of trying to handle stress or loneliness or just overwhelming anxiety. So this explainer is all about decoding some of those patterns, not to judge them at all, but to finally understand what they might be saying. Okay, let's get into our first clue, and this is a big one for a lot of people: using a habit as a coping mechanism. So just ask yourself honestly, have you ever turned to this habit not because you were genuinely aroused, but because you were feeling anxious or bored or just completely overwhelmed? Now, in moderation, that's one thing. But if it becomes your default escape route anytime you feel uncomfortable, well, that might be a sign you're using it to avoid your emotions instead of processing them. And this isn't just a theory. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, researchers actually found this happening a lot. Many people weren't really looking for pleasure. They were looking for a way to deal with the intense stress of it all. The habit became a tool, a way to soothe or numb out or just fill a void. Next up is a pattern that can feel so frustrating, what we'll call the compulsive loop. This one is less about escaping and way more about just feeling stuck. You know this feeling? You tell yourself, okay, I'm going to take a break from this. But then, before you know it, it's happening again. And afterward, you just feel this wave of frustration, almost like you're not even in control. That feeling right there, that's the key. So here's a really important way to think about this. When you feel trapped in that loop, research suggests it might not just be about having a high libido. Your brain might actually be screaming for regulation, a way to manage emotional overload, not just a physical release. It's a cry for balance. Now let's talk about the emotional aftermath that some people experience. And that is the wave of guilt or shame. There's actually a name for this feeling. It's called moral incongruence. It's basically what happens when your actions clash with your deep down internal values that might come from your upbringing, your culture, or your personal beliefs. And that internal fight can cause some really profound distress and a whole lot of self-doubt. And for our final pattern, let's look at something that can be just as revealing: emotional numbness. This is when the act just feels, automatic. What used to bring pleasure now just feels like going through the motions. There's no spark, no real feeling, just routine. This kind of emotional disconnect can be a sign of something called anhedonia, which is a big word for losing pleasure in things you used to enjoy. It's a core symptom of depression, and it can absolutely show up in our private lives. And I think this is just such a compassionate and important way to see it. Feeling numb doesn't mean you're broken. It's not some personal failing. Sometimes it's just a signal that your emotional system is overloaded, that you've been carrying a heavy weight for way too long. Okay, so we've identified some of these patterns. Now what? Let's pivot from just observing to actually doing something with some really gentle, practical steps you can take to build more self-awareness. We're going to break down 4 simple, totally doable steps you can start using pretty much immediately. Just think of them as tools in your toolbox for learning to listen to your body. So here's how it works. First, just pause and ask yourself, hey, what emotion might I be trying to avoid right now? Second, try to note your triggers. What just happened right before you felt the urge? Third, shift your question. Instead of asking, was this right or wrong, try asking, was I acting from a place of care for myself or from avoidance? And finally, reconnect with your senses. Just notice something simple, like the feeling of warm water, the sound of a song you love, or sunlight on your skin. These little things can ground you in the present. And all of this, really, it all leads to our final and most important point, which is all about learning to listen without judgment. Let's be super clear about this. The goal here isn't necessarily to just stop a habit cold.
It's to start a conversation with yourself. It's about beginning to see these patterns not as a source of shame, but as a source of really valuable information about what you need.
So please remember, your habits don't define you or your mental health, but they can be a mirror reflecting what's going on deep inside. And simply becoming aware of that connection, that is a huge, powerful, and really positive first step. You are definitely not alone in figuring all this out. So I'll leave you with this question to carry with you. Beyond the habit, beyond the urge, what is your body, your nervous system, your heart really asking for? Is it comfort? Is it connection? Is it just some relief? The journey begins the moment you start to listen.